This is a podcast about a college athlete and a guy that definitely would not have talked to her in college. Now they get paid to talk to each other broadcasting basketball games, although they don't get paid to do this podcast yet.
Welcome back in after a bye week to another episode of The Athlete and the guy that would not have talked to her in college. My name is Joel Gadet.
And I'm Meghan McEwen, and for the record, I am the athlete, and Joel is the guy that would never have talked to me in college.
Thank you for setting that straight.
People have been asking me questions. I'm just trying to make sure we are as transparent as possible. I never want to be accused of being fake news, especially nowadays. So That's where I stand on that.
Anyway, real news, Meghan, sports, they're back. We're going to get an NBA season, or at least a continuation of the current one. It starts July 31st, maybe July 30th, I think, in Disney World. Jared Diamond, friend of the show from the Wall Street Journal, tweeted out that if you would have told him as a child that an entire sports league would play its season at Disney World in a bubble, it would have been the greatest thing ever. Not a huge Disney guy myself, but there are going to be a lot of happy people.
How are you not a huge Disney guy?
That's what you took from that?
Yes, that is what I took from it. Because we're about to have this great conversation with Pat Boylan, who is a broadcaster for the Pacers and for the Fever. And I don't understand why you don't like Disney.
It was great when I was 7.
It was the most magical thing in the world to go to the most magical place on earth and get one of those Mickey Mouse ice cream bars. I swear they taste different than any other ice cream bar.
You know Jim Gaffigan, the comedian?
Yes, I do, actually.
Yeah, he does a whole thing about Disney World where it's basically, because you go in the summertime, it's just waiting in line on the surface of the sun.
It's not wrong. Back to basketball, though. No, and it truly is great. I mean, Disney World, basketball combined. It's going to be interesting. July 31st. Keep in mind, these players haven't played real basketball in 3 months. I am surprised that they have decided to come back and they're not going straight into the playoffs. They're going to play 8 regular season games before getting started. Going to be interesting to see how this plays out. And my biggest question is going to be, can everybody follow the rules and stay in the bubble?
Like, if you need a snack at night, do you have to order pizza from the only place open in Salt Lake City? And hope that it's not tainted when 5 delivery guys show up at your door. That's never happened in the NBA's history before. Like, how do you handle what we take for granted? Being on the road in a situation like that will be wild to see. But to break it all down, Meghan, we've got Pat Boylan from the broadcasting crew of the Indiana Pacers.
Joining us now is Ball State's finest broadcaster. That is Pat Boylan, the broadcaster of the Indiana Fever and Indiana Pacer games. Pat, thank you for coming on. And we're very excited because earlier this week, the NBA announced that there would be a season beginning July 31st down with Mickey Mouse in Orlando, Florida. First and foremost, what were your initial thoughts when you saw this come out and the rules that they have laid out so far?
Well, first and foremost, I appreciate the introduction, but as I think you know, there's a building there named after David Letterman, and Ball State has spit out and is continuing to spit out plenty of talented broadcasters. So I know that is kind of
Bob Ross, Pat.
yeah, Bob Ross, exactly. So I appreciate the introduction, but I don't think I'm anywhere near that mantle. To the answer your question, there's just been so much uncertainty, and I know this includes both of your lives as well. When everything went down in mid-March, what's going to happen? Is there going to be a season? What's the next step? And I think there had just been a lot of hope and a lot of rumors, and we aren't there to totally having something locked down just yet. But to have some tangible framework in place, it feels so good to just know that at least that is there, and that hopefully, the season will resume, as you said, in late July. And obviously with the proposal that's in place and been approved by the governors, that's 22 teams, which includes the Pacers. So we don't know a lot of specifics yet. It's all generalities. It's all fairly vague. It's all general framework. But we do know, obviously, the Pacers would be involved, and our hope is to have, our normal broadcasts as normal as we can make them.
That was my first question, was what is a normal broadcast for you at this point? Is it potentially calling it off a monitor at a studio downtown, or do you get to go hang out in the animal kingdom during the day and call games at night?
Well, I will tell you, we don't know for sure who, if anybody, is going to go down there, but where I rank on the totem pole, I would say my odds are very, very low. Probably lower than, any specific NBA team that's maybe at 21 or 22 winning the championship. So my expectation is hopefully that we still have our normal broadcasts, and that, Mark Boyle on the radio side is calling the game, and I'm doing pre-half, post, sideline, all the normal stuff. But from Indy and in a studio, it's very possible that Mark Boyle will be calling it off a monitor too. We just don't know those details yet. We've had a couple of discussions, with our vice president of broadcasting, and I know he's very busy right now trying to figure out all the technicalities and to hopefully make this work as best as possible. My guess and hope is in a couple of weeks we'll know the answers to those questions, but as of right now, there's still a lot up in the air.
Does that apply to Denary and those guys as well? Basically nobody knows at this point?
I think so. I think everybody has an idea of what they think is most likely, and that might be calling games off of monitors. But there's a lot of technicalities to figure out too. The field house, one of the toughest things about this coronavirus pandemic is when it hit, is that the field house had scheduled back-to-back years of construction in the off season. In fact, the Fever, which we might talk about later, we're planning on moving over to Hinkle Fieldhouse for 2 years to play their games. And not to get into specifics, but the coronavirus has obviously impacted a lot of that renovation happening at the field house, but they're still trying to do as much as they can. So that adds another kind of wrinkle into all of this, is trying to work around some of this construction that they're trying to do. And assuming that the games are called remotely, we might have to get a little bit creative.
Pat, one of the most interesting parts of this NBA season continuing, to me at least, was we had this 3-month pause, obviously with the pandemic hitting. From your standpoint and from your feel of being around the Pacers office and whatnot, how badly did the organizations want to continue a season and finish out the 2020 year?
Yeah, and one of the interesting aspects of that too is, just like the season came to a halt, everybody, most people, except for those, essential workers, went home and left the office as well, and had things like this, like a Zoom call. But, frankly, I just wasn't around the same type of conversation that I normally might be. I don't know the exact dollar signs and dollar figures and numbers like that, but obviously when you have a playoffs in the limbo, and the Pacers were 65 games the way through the season. So in some regard, they got more lucky than baseball in that the season is I guess a little more than 3/4 the way over. But on the other hand, there's still, for Indiana, 17 games that weren't completed in the regular season, and then at minimum a first-round playoff series. And that affects the bottom line pretty significantly, from the owners, obviously, to the players, and that can have a trickle-down effect. So I think always a plan A has been get back and get going and trying to find some way to make this work. But there's just so many contingencies and so many side aspects of this that even I hadn't considered until, I'm sitting there with Woj and Shams notifications on, and they mention, a certain point or a certain aspect that makes things challenging. And, I go, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that. And there's just so many avenues as it relates to this that are a lot more challenging than just saying, let's all go to one place and play a bunch of games. But I know this is close to their plan A, as close as this can be to a plan A, is what they have down. And the hope is that, the train continues in motion and that they do get down to Orlando, and this plan that's in place right now comes to fruition in late July.
I had read at one point there was a tweet that talked about like some of the rule breakdowns of like the higher seeded team can bring their home court and like the higher seeded team could pick the hotel. Is that actually true, or am I just like getting my chain pulled?
Well, to be honest with you, so many of these hypotheticals, as much as I do, because we sit here with Woj and Shams notifications on. It reminds me a little bit, even though the scenario is very different, of trade deadline time around the NBA, because we go on these radio appearances and everybody wants to know, are the Pacers making moves? What's the rumblings? And the reality is, again, too far down the totem pole to know those kind of things. So I think it's maybe possible they look to enact some sort. I mean, it would make sense. Like if they have certain hotels for certain teams, it would make sense that if they have to divvy them out some way, why not let Milwaukee and the LA teams pick first? If they can get the courts down there, more power to them. That seems like just an incredible hassle, considering, I don't know, so much of the home court advantage to me is your fans and the building you play in. not necessarily the wood below your feet. Maybe an athlete would tell you differently. Maybe, they all have a slightly different feel to them. That seems like a lot of work for very little significance, but it just kind of shows you, it seems like they are throwing so many things at the wall right now and just trying to figure out if any of it should stay.
Meghan, you're the athlete. Home court. Does the physical court matter?
I don't necessarily think, as Pat has been saying, the wood underneath your feet actually matters when it comes to playing. Home court advantage comes from being in your own space, having access to your locker room, being able to do your normal routine that you perform on a day in, day out basis, in addition to having your own fans and not having to travel. I also think there is an advantage to traveling, however. Joel, you and I have talked about this before. I love the concept in college football where the home teams stay in a hotel the night before a game. And I think that does a lot of good things from the point of limiting distractions, everybody being together. It's good team chemistry. It's just good overall to set your focus leading into the game the next day. So from that standpoint, I think there is an advantage to traveling and being in one space. However, home court advantage is going to be interesting to see how these teams are going to play out, because this is essentially playing on a neutral site. And by essentially, I mean it truly is a neutral site.
Yeah, I mean, and you could add on to this, but it seems like to me, the sight lines, for example, playing at Northwestern is very different than, playing in one of the arenas with the big bulls, or certainly you hear this, it's a talking point when they play in Lucas Oil, for example. But in this scenario, everyone's got that same sight line and no one really has played in it before. So it's not even like if these games were played in the Orlando Magic's arena, then maybe there's an advantage because they're used to shooting on those hoops with those backdrops. But, to me, the floor doesn't really seem to make that much of a difference.
Pat, something unique about the situation that the NBA has drawn up is everyone's expected to stay in this bubble for 3 months. I was wondering, how realistic is it that all of these teams, including coaches, staff personnel, equipment managers, trainers, actually follow the rules and stay in this bubble so they can play the rest of the season?
I don't know. It's so much of this is so fascinating because there's been no precedent. We haven't even seen anything like this. And on one hand, you're right. Like, I think they were saying you would be there for potentially 53 days before you would either leave or your family would be allowed in. Has been, some of the recent discussion, which is a very long time. On the other hand, I'm thinking of it, especially if I'm not, one of the star players, but maybe even more if you're a star player, because if you catch, coronavirus and you're LeBron James, that's a massive blow to your team, obviously. I'm thinking of it, though, as like if I'm the, 8th, 9th, 10th man on the roster and, I'm sneaking out of my place in the middle of the night, for lack of a better phrase, and I catch something that then I give to my team, and then I'm outed as the guy that couldn't follow the rules. That seems like it could have, massive implications on the chemistry around your own team and even maybe your future career. If you were the guy that, brought something back to your team and hurt their chances, does another team want to sign you when we're back to normal? It's all hypothetical, but it's tough to know. It seems like it would be challenging to pull off, but maybe everybody just, kind of needs to understand that we're going to have to tough this out for a month and a half, 2 months. And that's obviously a lot easier to say when you're not going to be in the bubble too.
Pat, if we talked about it off the top with the potential of broadcasters being down there, if Mark Boyle is sent to Disney World to broadcast the NBA playoffs, what's his second job at Disney World, if you had to take a guess?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question because he is so unique. He is so odd, and he's done all of these odd jobs in the off season. So I feel like that would be right up his alley. Obviously, this is hypothetical because I don't think he would be allowed to do any of this. But he never had kids, and so he doesn't love kids. So it doesn't seem like he would be like a ride operator or anything. But Disney's got some good adult bars, and maybe I'll think of a better answer as this podcast goes on. But initially, I would say like a bartender at a bourbon and a cigar bar.
Pat, on the flip side of all of this, who gets the advantage with these rules?
There's a couple of different lines of thought, and I have no idea which makes the more sense. It might just be the fact that If you take all of these other ancillary pieces out, then even more talent wins. And if that's the case, obviously the Giannis's and the LeBrons and the Kawhis of the world are advantaged by that. But I think when you have a scenario like this where the NBA playoffs are set to advantage, obviously, the top teams. And so when anything from the status quo changes, to me, that seems to be advantage everybody else besides those top teams. And I'm not suggesting that the Lakers or the Clippers aren't favorites, or Milwaukee and Boston aren't favorites necessarily in the East. But it does seem like, maybe the ceiling comes down a little bit and the floor comes up. The most obvious example of that is home court going away. And, does that even the playing field a little bit? But just any sort of rhythm you were in. Milwaukee was on pace to have one of the best seasons in NBA history. And for a while, we were wondering, do they have any chance at getting to 72, 73, some of those elite numbers of wins that we've seen, the Bulls and the Warriors accomplish over the last couple of decades in the NBA? It doesn't appear like they were going to get there, but upper 60s certainly seemed possible. Well, you take all that momentum away, can they get it back? And then there's also the aspect of how important is how seriously the players have taken the last 2 months going to impact when they get back. If you have a team that maybe every single player, worked extremely hard and didn't take any time off and was able to find access to hoops and courts and physical training and all of that, maybe they're bumped up over a team that didn't take things quite so seriously. Unfortunately, I don't really have a feel if that's the case for which teams would fall under those examples, other than the fact that I've had these Zoom chats with probably 6 or 7 of our rotation guys, and it seems like they're taking it very seriously. It seems like, their regular workouts, they're finding ways, to do them, even if they don't have their full slate of the equipment room, the weight room, they don't have the practice facility. It seems like they're taking it as seriously as they can. But, part of the timing with all of this that's so unique is there was no time to plan. There was no time to, set up alternate facilities and set up, weight rooms that all of these players could access. One day the season was normal. A couple days later, it was, kind of on a hinge. And then a couple days after that, everybody was sent home.
It reminded me of in Space Jam, which I talk about often on this podcast because it's my favorite movie. But when all the players lose their talent, that's been like our joke in our family. It's like nobody wants to come in and they cancel the NBA season or whatever. Very similar to that. So maybe the Monstars are behind the coronavirus. We're not quite sure. We'll have to look into that. That being said, I know there have been talks throughout the league just over time about potentially pushing back the start time of the NBA to like Christmas to prevent competing with the NFL and college football, college basketball. How likely is it that we might see a model where maybe that starts to be implicated?
Yeah, I think because of the circumstances, they're first and foremost almost guaranteed to have to start the season. In the current proposal, they're talking about a potential Game 7 of the NBA Finals being October 12th or 13th. And I think the season started the 17th this year. So obviously they can't have a 3-day off season. So very obviously it's going to have to be pushed back. The way they do that, I think, will be fascinating to watch. Can they pull it off so only next year's calendar is impacted? And can the 21-22 season, are they able to get that back to starting in mid-late October? Or is this going to impact multiple off seasons? And then another aspect you have to this is hopefully the Summer Olympics will be taking place next year in Japan. So if that's the case, obviously the NBA sends a lot of guys there too, and they probably can't be playing a season anywhere near those Olympics. It's something that Meghan is well, the WNBA battles. The WNBA every 4 years has to shut down for 5 or 6 weeks for the Olympics, and obviously that's something the NBA doesn't want to do. I'm not sure if they would ever consider a permanent change. You've heard people, say maybe if you try to offset the NFL calendar more, then that could help with ratings. I've also talked to a couple people in the TV business that talk about how in the summer the amount of people that watch TV is lower, like the sets in use number is lower. And so while you might be able to have less competition if you delayed the season more permanently, if less people are watching TV, then that might actually have a negative impact. And all of that's like a million times over my head. But I'm sure it's something that people way smarter than me would take into consideration.
You think football is still fun?
Zero fun, sir.
Basically, I like outdoor sports, but indoor sports have their place too.
All right, Meg, we change gears from the NBA to the NFL, obviously in the spotlight for a lot of reasons, not directly related to football over the last couple of days and weeks. The one this week is interesting. The NFL has announced that over the next 10 years, it is donating $250 million to social justice causes and has left the door open to being willing to work with Colin Kaepernick in that endeavor. So my questions to you, Meghan McEwen, one, your thoughts on the NFL really diving in to this initiative and what you really want to see from the NFL to see that this isn't just lip service.
Well, hi, Roger Goodell. Welcome to social justice. This is ridiculous that it's taken the NFL this long to get to this point. I think back to when Colin Kaepernick started to take a knee in the 2016 season, I believe it was. And, I mean, say what you want. He was blackballed from the NFL as a result of it. Now, I want to see the NFL put their money where their mouth is. Or I want to see, what exactly, where is this money going to? What organizations are benefiting from it? What's the motivation behind it from Roger Goodell? Is he doing this from a PR standpoint, or is he doing this because we genuinely messed up? I would like to see Roger Goodell come out and make a statement regarding Colin Kaepernick. His stats were not as bad as you cannot tell me that Colin Kaepernick is the worst quarterback in the NFL, like worse than some of these third string guys that are on rosters. Like, you cannot convince me of that. Colin Kaepernick played in the Super Bowl not too long ago for the 49ers. So the fact that that's what you're going to blame it on is BS, in my opinion.
The bigger thing is it just money, or are you now behind this as a league? Because here is what is going to happen come September. The national anthem will be played, and the entire league is going to take a knee. And somebody who lives in a giant White House at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue is going to tweet angry things about how horrible the players are and how they need to stand for the flag, no kneeling. You know that is what's going to happen. The question is, in that moment, does the NFL and do the owners back their player and their players, or does the public pressure become an issue? And does the public pressure mimic what it seemed to be when Kaepernick took a knee in 2016? Or does it mimic what we're looking at now, where you're seeing much more of a public groundswell of support for protest movements like that?
I hope they do. I hope the league backs the players. They should back the players. It would be really powerful if the NFL had a united message and backed its players. The owners and the players came together to show this united message to the rest of the country. Keep in mind, a lot of people, and we've discussed this on our show before, have talked about athletes and celebrities, using their platform to preach about social justice and whatnot, and whatever cause they may support. And what's the point of having a platform if you're not using that for good to help, infuse the younger generation with power and with confidence and with opportunities for when they get older? So if the NFL came out, which is such a huge platform, which is such a huge business, if they came out with a united front, I think that would do wonders for our country and for the social issues that we currently face.
How about NASCAR making news this past week? No more Confederate flags. Now, what will be interesting is when people start showing up in Confederate flag t-shirts, belt buckles, all that stuff. Like,
well, if you go to Myrtle Beach, you can see Confederate flag swimsuits.
100%. Like that will be interesting on how that all gets policed. But I 100% agree with this, 100% long overdue. What has been interesting about it is the overwhelming acceptance of it publicly and by people within NASCAR. Ryan McGee wrote a beautiful article talking about his history, like his family history. His ancestors fought in the Confederacy. And he said this was the right thing to do years ago. Why didn't we do it? Greg Doyle in the Indy Star wrote a huge "Take Down the Monuments" article. It's funny because we've always demagogued issues like this, like how dare you say that we can't fly the Confederate flag? And now we're at a time in society where they finally pulled the trigger on it, and people were just like, yeah, one guy said he would never race again in the truck series, and that's fine. He's never won before, so great.
No one heard of him, yeah.
But big strides. Kudos for finally doing the right thing.
It's interesting. I read an article earlier today about NASCAR ratings and how they've fallen drastically since 2015. And if NASCAR wants to open its audience and try to gain a bigger viewership, this was the right decision to try to maybe gain some new fans to the sport. It is the right thing to do, especially in this day and age where now it's okay to openly say racism is wrong. And
which is hilarious that it wasn't okay.
It was kind of like don't ask, don't tell, right? It was like that weird uncle that shows up where it's like, we're not going to talk about it. We're just going to let him be him. But in reality, now you can say this is wrong.
Right. We went from don't say what you believe on Twitter 2 weeks ago to why are you not saying this? Now, here's the thing. For me, this is a good first step. And I think you've started to see the other things that come from this socially. You've started to see big take down the monuments and take down the statues movements, which is all part of this. Bottom line, there is no other place in the world, and don't at me if there's some random country that you can think of. There's no other place in the world. There was a outright rebellion in this country where certain states decided they didn't want to be part of the country anymore, regardless of the reasons, and these reasons happen to be abhorrent. Yeah, slavery. They wanted to own people. And some people, certainly, some people lived in the South and didn't own slaves. They were anti-slavery. There are definitely people that would be like, my great-great-grandfather didn't like slavery, but he was from Mississippi, and he felt like he was called to fight for his side. You know what? I'm sure there were also people in World War II that didn't like the Third Reich's stance, but they lived in Germany and they had to fight for the cause. They're not going to fly the swastika outside their house today in support of their great-grandfather. That's not how it works anywhere else in the world but here. And what was funny to me was there was a tweet the other day, Japan has these suspended monorails that now fly through cities, and somebody said, how come we don't have those? And somebody replied saying, because we're still litigating the Civil War. We can't get out of our own way because we can't move on past what is obviously a dumb argument. And the thing is, now we've gotten rid of the Confederate flag at NASCAR events. They're starting to take down Confederate monuments. Let me pull this back into sports, though. Meg, you know what Ole Miss comes from?
No.
The phrase Ole Miss? Ole Miss is what slaves used to refer to the wives of their owners as.
That was going to be my guess.
The Ole Miss. There is a university, and this is not a new thing. If you Google this, you'll find all sorts of articles about it. There is a university in America that goes by a name that dates back to slavery. Its mascot is the rebel. In the Civil War, the side that was fighting for slavery were the rebels. So you have a university called Ole Miss with a mascot that is the rebel. And its physical mascot used to actually be a rebel. I will read you a quote. This was from an article about the move away from the rebel to originally a bear and now a land shark. If you've ever seen Ole Miss's mascot, it's a shark in a football uniform. It's from NBC News. Described the mascot as the overtly Confederate school mascot, a white plantation owner dressed in a Confederate uniform. That's what he was years ago. They moved away from that over time. But they're still called the rebels.
Right.
Like, what are we doing? And here's an article. This was a 2014 article from the Clarion Ledger that said a national survey done by the school revealed that most people don't associate the term with slavery. Ole Miss. It doesn't matter if they associate it with it. Like, if somebody called me a derogatory term because of my Jewish heritage and I didn't realize it was derogatory, it doesn't make it not derogatory.
Just because it doesn't offend you doesn't mean it's not offensive.
So that's one. And then number two, when it comes to the rebel, like, it's clearly a Civil War soldier. That's what it is. And we talk, and you can say, like, well, that's what it's been forever. It's an SEC school. Like, it's tradition. Call them the Mississippi Land Sharks. Your mascot is already a land shark. You have shark logos. There's like a cover of the media guide with a football player doing this for a fin. It's not like other places haven't changed their names. I'll run you down a list. Belmont used to be the Rebels. They changed to the Bruins in 1995. The Dixie State Rebels. They're now the Trailblazers. Eastern Michigan used to be the Hurons. It's a Native American tribe. They're now the Eagles. Mississippi State was the Maroons in 1961, like not all that long ago. They have obviously now changed. I mean, you can run down the list. ULM is the Warhawks. They used to be the Indians. Miami is the Redhawks, used to be the Redskins. In this particular instance, where we're all up in arms about social justice, particularly around the Civil War, slavery, and the Black experience in America. And yet we're running around with a school from a state with the Confederate flag in its state flag. Just call yourself the Mississippi Land Sharks. We'll get used to it.
I love it. And if you tweeted all of that, I'd hit retweet.
It's not 2 minutes and 20 seconds. I'd have to condense it.
Rise and shine.
You're dead to me, and you are, because I'm out.
Can we please accept this route?
Absolutely, I will.
Time now for pop culture. And ever since the Black Lives Matters protests have started, we've seen a lot of celebrities using their platforms to come out in support of Black Lives Matter, in support of George Floyd, and other various people who have fallen at the hands of the police. One of those actresses that came out was Lea Michele. Joel, did you ever watch Glee?
Did I ever watch Glee?
Come on. That's a no? That was a yes. You did watch Glee.
Yeah, that's the thing. I'm a loser like me.
I only watched like a little bit of it, so I don't quite know. However, I do love a good...
Hang on. Keep going.
So you watched Glee, Joel, and Lea Michele, the main character on Glee, has gotten into a little bit of hot water this week. So Samantha Ware, who was cast in, I believe, season 6 of Glee, came out and, oh my God, you watched Glee. You weren't kidding. Okay.
Sorry, continue.
All right. Well, Joel's a Glee. So, you know Lea Michele, the main character of Glee. She came out and tweeted how horrible the situation with George Floyd is. And Samantha Ware, who was cast in a small role on Glee, I believe in season 6. Samantha Ware also, by the way, was in Hamilton on Broadway in Chicago, and I saw her twice in Rockstar. Big Samantha Ware fan, very talented young lady. She retweeted Lea Michele and said, LOL, remember when you made my life miserable on set and said horrible things to me and made me question being in Hollywood in general. And it kind of like turned into this whole entire huge story that Lea Michele had made some awful comments towards Samantha Ware and they were racist. And now HelloFresh has pulled their sponsorship from Lea Michele.
Great
And
food, by the way.
I've never tried it before, but you can't use Lea Michele's promo code anymore because she's no longer with them. So really interesting to see some of these celebrities get into a little bit of hot water, you know. I think it's good that finally they're being held in check. Apparently, I just read an article on E! About Lea Michele, and apparently she's been a total diva her whole entire life and no one likes working with her.
Well,
So,
like I don't necessarily like I don't want to cast aspersions because I don't know Leah Michelle, but I will say like what was interesting about the article was like Heather Morris was quoted in it too, who played Brittany, who is not on here. Brittany was not African American. Brittany was very white. So apparently that runs across racial, gender, whatever kind of.
People are just bad people. It doesn't matter what the color of your skin is.
Well, I don't like, and again, I don't know a lot about her, but I have read a lot. Like her and Naya Rivera did not get along. Apparently, Naya also not on the box. But
what kind of Glee fan are you if you don't even have a box?
I'm trying to like point, but they're not on the box. But what's interesting about that show is like just apparently it's cursed. Like you can go back and read articles like about the set and different things that happen on the show, and obviously Corey Monteith, who played Finn Hudson, he is on the box right here. He passed away tragically during the filming of the show. But all sorts of different things that happened on the set. Apparently, as lovey as the show was and the cast, and it was all about unity, that is not what happened off camera.
And while we're on the topic of pop culture, I have talked about my disgust for The Bachelor. However, I would like to give a shout out to The Bachelor this week for naming their first Black Bachelor, Matt.
It only took 18 seasons for the African American community to have one of the most desirable men in the country.
He's beautiful.
He's a very good-looking man. But, like, here's the thing: why are we? It's like it was funny because like they were praising them on television this morning, and somebody said, "Yeah, it only took 18. I think it's 18. It only took 18 seasons to find a good-looking African American. Only 18.
Maybe I will watch The Bachelor this season.
Like you mean it? And again, I haven't followed it well enough. You mean to tell me that they couldn't find somebody who wasn't white for the first 20 years this show was on TV?
Did you not hear my beef with it? Go back and listen to it from the first
Episode.
Anyway, shout out to The Bachelor for that. Way to go. Matt James, good luck, my man. Hope you find the love of your life.
Nice jacket, by the way, that he had in that introduction video.
Yeah. Well, he's also like best friends with Tyler Cameron, who was on The Bachelorette. Hannah.
I thought you didn't watch.
I know all this stuff because I know pop culture, but I do not watch it. I'm going to break my spell to watch this season's Bachelor.
I do have one more TV show note to bring up with you, though. I sent you an article that I thought was interesting in these particular times because television personalities and producers are reevaluating how they portray the criminal justice system and police on television now, which is interesting from two perspectives, I thought. One was there is an obvious suspension of disbelief when you watch a TV show. Like, you go into it knowing this isn't really how police operate in real life, or Jack Bauer is not a great representation of the CIA. Like, that's not how that works. But also, like I served jury duty 2 years ago, and what being in a courtroom is like is nothing like you would have any expectation it's like watching TV. So it is interesting because what do you think, Meg, the responsibility of a television production like that is in terms of molding society's perceptions of what police behavior should be and what's okay, and what people will tolerate as okay based on what they are shown through what they consume? Like love him to death, Elliot Stabler always is assaulting people illegally on Law & Order SVU. And you're in a day and age where the president of the United States is saying, like, hey, when you're arresting people, if you hit their head on the car, that's cool with me. Is it almost like, from a Hollywood standpoint, maybe having a little bit more
awareness
in how you portray people?
Essentially saying, don't make dangerous, dirty police work heroism.
Right, correct, bingo, thank you.
No, and I think that's a really important note moving forward that needs to happen. That being said, I also think it's important for people to realize that television is television and it's not real at the end of the day. And I think also at the same time, I wonder if it's even going to make a difference, because I feel like as consumers, we are so just washed out from all of the crap we see on TV regarding violence. So I don't know how much of an effect it's going to have, but it's something that's important to keep in mind moving forward.
It's almost a long-term play too, of just over time, what does a perception change based on what you're exposed to day in and day out. All right, final segment, Meghan McEwen. You're dressed for it, so we'll talk about it.
TMI? Too much information. It's just easier to say TMI. I used to say don't go there, but that's lame.
Okay, so TMI.
Yeah.
I note I got mascara on my arm today and on my armpit. I was trying to put makeup on, and that's why I don't wear makeup very often. Anyways, that being said, I've started playing golf. So fun fact about me, I don't like doing things that I'm not good at. In fact, I hate doing things I'm not good at.
Most people don't like that, I feel. Yeah.
Right. Well, I hate a couple things. I hate playing video games. I'm horrible at video games. I hate playing video games. I hate bowling. I'm not good at bowling. I don't enjoy. I can't just go and have fun with people and kind of I'm not good, but I'll lose. I freaking hate bowling. So therefore, I'm also not good at Monopoly. So I try to avoid that. Golf, I've tried to avoid for a long time, but now I have friends that play. My dad wants me to play all the time. So I took a golf lesson yesterday, and I am 28. My sister's 18. And for far enough an age where there's really not a sibling rivalry at all. She's my best friend in the whole wide world. However, at the golf course yesterday, I could barely hit the ball. She was freaking knocking them long and straight, at least 100 yards, just crushing the ball.
That's because she's still an active athlete.
No, it has nothing to do with that, because I work out all the time, and I'm an active athlete as well. That being said, I got so frustrated at one point, I almost started crying. And not because I was sad, I was so frustrated that she was making it look so easy, and I just couldn't figure it out.
It's not real until you throw a club into the woods.
I mean, I was, and the golf pro was really nice, and he was being encouraging and all, but I was just he told me 6 things I had to do, and then he goes, now don't think. And I was oh, and then my sister's just crushing it, and I just was this is my worst nightmare. But I played 9 holes with my dad and my mom later that night, and I actually first shot driving, hit it long and straight about 150 yards. So I'm about to go to the driving range after we finish this show and keep working on my golf game, because I'd like to get good at it, because I think it'd be good to be good at golf.
All right. That's a finish. We'll finish that. There.
Finish.
All right. Next week, Meg.
Hopefully I'll be better at golf by then.
Okay, let me know.